Ask the Podcast Coach for June 13th, 2020.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music. That means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. And the guy right over there, at least right now, take a picture while you got him. It's Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv. Last week, my internet provider had a problem, and so I kept cutting in and out. And it turns out, much like COVID-19, apparently that was contagious, and Jim now has the same problem I did. So, yeah. Jim, thanks for coming, buddy.
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. I hope people can hear me. I can barely hear you, so I'm just going to kind of piece words together. So forgive me if I don't know, say something wrong. Yeah, literally right after the show was over, everything was good. That evening, I started having trouble, and it's been a mess. I almost had to cancel Thursday night, had to cancel a show at Gallup on Friday because things weren't working. So it's just been kind of nuts. But you know what isn't nuts is we have a coffee pour this morning.
We do have a coffee pour.
Let me do this.
Brought to you by podcastbranding.co. If you're looking for artwork or a website or an ebook or a lead magnet or anything you want, I love Mark for, I use him now for my artwork, but man, if you want a good looking website, he makes really pretty stuff. He's a podcaster himself. He's an award-winning graphic artist. And if you are looking to get anything, it's for me, I think I told the story. I was reading a book on crowdfunding, and there was a guy was trying something on Kickstarter, and he did make his goal or whatever. And he took the money that he did get and put it into better graphics and then tried again. And they actually made the goal because it just looked more professional. And that's really Mark's main goal, is to make you look super professional, super great. And if you need any of that stuff, check him out over at podcastbranding.co. And he's Canadian, so he's polite. So, I mean, what more do you want? But yeah, so it was fun last week. I got to give you kudos because it was fun. My modem would reboot, and I would eventually connect back on. And then all of a sudden, I just looked over, and it was yellow lights. And when they're blue, it means I'm connected. And I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And all of a sudden, it just dawned on me, I'm not going to reconnect. And so then I was trying to text Jim to say, hey, I'm not coming back. Well, my phone was still connected to my Wi-Fi, which was not connected. And I'm trying to send anybody on Slack, hey, I'm not coming. I finally was just like, okay, he'll eventually figure it out that I'm not coming back. So I felt bad.
No, at one point I realized, because we got you back a couple times.
Yeah.
And at one point I was like, yeah, I don't think we're going to see Dave again.
Yeah.
And I figured you had given up. And speaking of giving up, I think my video locked up there for a second. At one point, I think I just kind of realized you weren't coming back, and I wasn't going to do a post show, but the chat room did such a good job of kind of keeping things rolling and talking to me and asking questions. So it seemed to work out okay.
Yeah, the chat room always comes through. That's the beauty of the show. Hey, one thing I keep forgetting to mention, I was going to ask you, should we actually try to do this? The 15th annual podcast awards nominations, the nomination period opens July 1st, which is in a couple of weeks, basically. With all the craziness happening in the world, Todd Cochran says, you may have forgotten, registration is open and you must be registered to participate. Disclaimer, there's a $25 registration fee for the awards as a self-sustaining kind of situation. Apparently, those awards are not cheap.
Yeah.
And Todd's not out to make a buck on this, but he's also not looking to put out thousands of dollars to make it happen. Should I register? Ask the podcast coach?
Yeah, for sure. Why wouldn't?
Right.
Yeah,
we'll
let's do it. Yeah,
and
it'll be fun. I mean, we have the best audience in the world.
That's it. I'm like, we got every week we can, tell 30 people to go vote, and I will do that today. I'm writing that down to do that, but I forget in all the craziness and all the news and things that are going on. I was like, okay, I should probably see if we want to do that. But I did find a question. This was from Bob out in a Facebook group. What is the most effective way to compile an email list. The goal of the email list is to send newsletters and essentially promote products that we've developed. Jim, do you have any, did you do much of this stuff?
Well, I do have an email list that I've gathered over the years. I think I'd throw that question back to maybe the group here to say, what's the most effective way to expand your email list? Because it's just like getting people to listen to your downloads, to your show. Yeah. How do you find new pockets for people to subscribe? And there's tricks, folks. You can put the little subscription banner up on your screen about when they're about to leave and some of those other kinds of things. The only way I've grown my list is mentioning it on the show. You can go to theaverageguy.tv/subscribe. I've gone on again, off again on my newsletter that I send. I say mostly weekly now because that's I don't get to it every week. But so that's the only way, Dave, I've really known to get subscribers. What else do you think? What
I did, I was working with a coach for a while, and he said, go into your website, not so much your downloads. Go into your website and see what are the top 10 episodes of your podcast, and then see if you can create a lead magnet for that particular thing. And I was amazed how well, because I went from getting no new subscribers to, how many people want to learn how to take a phone call on a podcast. I was like, wow. And in some cases, the lead magnet was, would you like this blog post as a PDF? It wasn't even there's a fun little marketing blurb. I forget what it's called, where you have, you give them, 1 through 3, but if you want 4 and 5, you have to give me your email address. And I forget what it's like a marketing gap, or there's some fun little buzz phrase for that, where it's just you because you don't want to give people half information. You don't want to go, and now for the rest of the story, I got to sign up. You don't do that because that just makes people mad. But it's kind of hey, if you want more information on this, I've got a thing for you. I know Jordan Harbinger always has. I'm always want to download one to see what it is. He makes a some sort of cheat sheet or reference sheet for every episode. And I was like, that sounds like a lot of work, but that would be a way to, get people on the list.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not a great writer. I mean, that's just something I don't enjoy. And so the idea of a weekly newsletter that is creative is a struggle for me. And so for some folks, they're just creative. That stuff comes out. By the time, and maybe I need to change my newsletter, the order in which I do it to get it done earlier. Because by the time today I do it at the end, the whole podcast production, and then that's kind of the last step at the end is get the letter out. And to combat that, I've been doing it on Mondays as opposed to on the weekends, just so I kind of separate it from my regular process. But I'm not as creative with those things. Some folks just are.
Yeah. Carrie says, I've been taking little nuggets out of my email content and turning it into social posts and then saying, hey, so if you want more information like this, go ahead and subscribe. What I started doing, it's funny how you said, I kind of weekly do this. I was great for 3 weeks straight. Mm-hmm. And all it is on Sunday night, I look at what did I do the past week? So, or what's coming up in the week or things like that. And it was called Podcast Halftime. And it was basically Wednesday. Hey, we're halfway through the week. Here's what I've been doing. Here's if I appeared on somebody's show or for any big news or things like that. And it really was almost no writing. It was just, hey, Dave was here. Here's the link. So-and-so. And I was amazed. All of a sudden in 1 week, I was like, oh, I didn't do a halftime thing. And I was like, really? You don't have enough time to gather up 5 links for a newsletter? But I was amazed because I had people saying, I love this format. And I was like, there's almost no format besides, I thought this was funny, link. This was, blah, blah, blah. But it's one of those things that, especially if you're looking to monetize your podcast, as much as we all talk about, Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and things like that, any study I ever hear currently, they still say email is king when it comes to getting people to click on stuff. And I was like, interesting. So
no, for sure. I do the same thing. It's a bunch of links. I shouldn't say it's more than just a bunch of links, but it's pretty much the content. It's just hey, we did this. This is coming up. You can sign up over here. The weird thing about that is there was a time in my life when I really enjoyed writing those things.
Mhm.
I did a newsletter type thing for a while, and I really enjoyed it. That just hasn't been now. You're like, why did that desire work? Like in the early days, like 2003, 4, 5, when I blogged a lot, man, I wrote a ton of stuff then. Now I should probably go back and see if it was any good. Like maybe it was just crap. Carrie says I could hire a ghostwriter or use like templates and then tweak them in your own voice. And that's very, very true. That is a topic. I guess I don't, because I don't, this is chicken and the egg kind of thing. I don't believe that many people are reading the newsletter, so I'm not willing to put that much time into it. But maybe because I'm not putting that much time into it, nobody's willing to read the newsletter.
Yeah,
so,
I use SendFox. I was on ConvertKit. I've been on Aweber, and the thing with SendFox, and this is nothing special to them. This is on everybody. You can see what your open rate is, but you can also see what people are clicking on. So that was because when I was doing the podcaster happy hour, that was always like the most clicked email because there was only one link and the link was to join the meeting. So everybody that wanted to join had to click it. So, that's
MailChimp
something.
will tell you too, right? MailChimp will tell you the links, the number of links that were clicked in there, and give you some stats and analytics around it, how much open rate. I had a weird situation happen too with my newsletter where it just started popping in places, almost like someone was auto subscribing people to it, like nefariously. I think that's the word. And so I gathered, I don't know, a couple, 400 or 500, but I don't think any of them were even real. And so as I've gotten back into the sending it weekly, I'm getting 5 unsubs a week, kind of getting those people out of there. So I don't know. I don't think I've maybe 350, I think, is what I have on my email list today. I think I get a consistent 90 of them to open, maybe 85 to 90 to open. So that's a third, fourth, let's say it's quarter. That's pretty consistent. So I'd say my list is somewhere in the 100 range. 100. And that's okay. They it's getting continuously opened.
That's it. Craig says they send out a monthly email with links to all the episodes released that month. And then Daniel from the audacitytopodcast.com says, my biggest things have been making some opt-in resources for episodes where it made sense, like a resource list. And then I used the most popular as my site-wide incentive. Yeah, there you go. And
what if I could grab Discord conversations and seed, like, hey, we talked about this. Here's a topic we talked about.
That would work.
I'm a rookie in this area still. I still need to work on this.
Yeah, Daniel said I switched from writing weekly emails to writing an almost year-long sequence that he's currently rewriting. It is tough. It's and it never fails for me that I can. What I used to do, if I did write a post, I would write it and let it sit a week, come back and look at it and run it through Grammarly and run it through Microsoft Word and any other kind of spell check. But it never failed. There'd be something where I'm like, oh, I had the word, the twice. And I'm like, how did that get through kind of thing? So
who's good at this, and as a great example, and I should think about it more, is Randy Cantrell. So Randy, and not from a newsletter standpoint, but he writes out his podcasts in advance, not all of them, but most of them, I think. And he does that, what you said, he writes something and then it sits and it goes into a folder and it marinates. Then he comes back to it and works on it, and it comes back and works on it more. I kind of think now, when I was blogging more successfully than I am now, or writing more successfully, that that was something I would have snippets of things that I would be writing about, and then pull them when they're ready. Don't use them just because it's during the week. But if you've got a pool of content like that, when something becomes ready, then you use it, as opposed to forcing something, onto your listeners.
Yeah, what I want to start doing is, there for a while I was writing a lot for the Podcast Business Journal, and Ed would just give me a topic and I would write about it. And either he's got enough writers, or he didn't like my stuff. I don't know what's going on, but I need to come up with a couple topics there. And what I need to do is put a link in those that I can track, because it is one of those things where I was spending hours, a lot of times I would just kind of flush it out of my brain, and again, come back in a couple days, rework it with a fresh set of eyes and that whole 9 yards. But it took a lot of time. I always wonder sometimes how much traffic that was driving to my website. Now I can't complain because he's actually got me as an advertiser on their website, which reminds me I should probably write something for Ed. But those are things you can do. Is like we said, if you track the links, if nobody's clicking on this stuff, maybe it's not worth the hassle or whatever, because it's a bummer. You see that, if you're lucky, you get 30% open rate, and then 10% of the people that open clicked on it, and you're like, So
I think it's worth it if you enjoy it. Like if
That's
you
it.
enjoy writing and nobody listens, no one's reading it. I mean, I know that sounds weird, but I think it's worth it because it's for you. Like sometimes it's like for me, podcasting is a little therapeutic, and I do it whether anybody was listening or not, because I just enjoy spending time with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is my hour. I get a free hour of Dave Jackson every Saturday morning, hour and a half, actually, a little bonus in there. And I like doing it. So I would do this regardless, right? And for writing, maybe that way for some people where they just need to do it. It feels good to them. I'm contemplating Carrie's idea a little bit more. She's mentioned that a couple weeks in a row of getting a ghostwriter, getting somebody to help on that. Now, at Gallup, I have writers, which is great. I don't do any of my own. In fact, I got a guy who writes show notes that are beautiful, like incredibly good. So I'm a little spoiled with it there, where I've got somebody doing it.
So do you then hire him to do your show notes?
I should. Well, and that's a little conflict of interest. Like I think,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just starting to think about this. This may be, well, but to your point, like, okay, what am I trying to achieve with writing? What am I trying to get done with it? What's the outcome? And I feel like if you hire for it, then you need to have an ROI. Like if I'm going to hire it out, I've got to justify the expense by saying, okay, so if I do hire it out, what am I looking for on the backside of that investment to improve? I guess in this case, it may be to improve Patreon, right? That's my one source of income for Home Gadget Geeks is Patreon. So maybe a writing campaign and that would require kind of a whole redo of Patreon for me. By the way, if you're using Patreon and you haven't looked at their sales tax thing, if you're providing benefits through Patreon, this is the month to probably look. There's some things you can do to kind of minimize that. But, and I don't know, that's on my list of things to do is to go look at Patreon. But Dave, I think that would be I would kind of say, okay, if I'm going to write towards driving people to engage in Patreon so that they'll become a subscriber.
I'm actually thinking of doing that. Randy says, why can't you do a video newsletter via email? You could. There are things like Loom is a free service. Of course, it's going to say Loom at the top of your page, but I use that sometimes for customer service. If somebody asks a question on the School of Podcasting, I'll just fire up Loom and talk into the camera and then copy and paste, and they get my answer via video. And that's a free tool. And it's only like $10 a month if you want the Loom taken away. Now I can't remember. You can't upload videos. So if you made another video in Camtasia and had all sorts of cool special effects on it and things like that, you can't upload that video to Loom. It's only, it's you live, and you could do a screencast, but that's it. But it's also like free and $10. So, and then at the end, I think if you're on the pro plan, you can have them at the end say, click here for more information. So if you're doing, that can come in kind of handy. So
I like that idea from Randy. Like, why don't I just sit down at the microphone? And by the way, I owe Kim a video intro on my site. That was her recommendation a month or two ago when we were talking about that. I need to put hey everybody, welcome. My name's Jim. Have a little conversation there. I've gotten a little bit better at that for the last 7 or 8 weeks. I have been the video host for our church's online services, and we pre-record them right after Ask the Podcast Coach today. In fact, Emily's story behind will make the church video today, which is going to be pretty cool. So I'll record those, and that's all mono. I mean, that's just me doing it. But I could create a little. This is because I'd be much more inclined to get a little more personal in the video side of things than I would. And I just, what I'd probably do? I'd create a newsletter channel.
I got too many things on the screen here, but Daniel's saying you could even publish, and I've heard of people doing this, unlisted videos on YouTube and then linking them in your email newsletter.
Yeah.
That way you can see how far people are watching. Some email systems like MailChimp will automatically generate a thumbnail for the video, which is kind of cool.
I think I'd create a newsletter channel, so a completely separate channel than your YouTube channel, and call it newsletter. And I don't think I'd unlist them. I think I'd make them just public, because you may get some people who land there who find it on YouTube as opposed to finding it through your stuff. And then I would say, hey, if you want to get notification of this, sign up for the newsletter that has all the links. I'm going to provide you a newsletter that's got some easy links in it for stuff. So, maybe I'll give that a try.
That's one of the things that I like almost every week think, you know what, I should make like a quick 2-minute, like, hey, this week on the School of Podcasting, we're talking with so-and-so and find a nugget. I don't want to do the old, hey, if you want to get the nuggets, you got to listen, like give them one and say, if you want more, yada, yada, yada.com/whatever kind of thing. And I don't know why I don't do that, because it requires me talking into a camera for 2 minutes and probably taking about 5 tries before I get it right and I'm happy with it. But I don't know. That's just one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, I'll do that next week. Oh yeah, I'll do that next week. So, and then Dan is saying here, you get notifications from YouTube for new videos. So why sign up for a newsletter if someone can do that?
It's just another way, another written form, another easy click. Sometimes finding the links is hard. I don't know. I like to provide more options than less. One way means I'm going to exclude some people. So I kind of take the Microsoft method, and there's about 8 or 9 different ways to do things. I know sometimes that's confusing for people who are completists and they want to do them all. They get a little frustrated. They're like, there's so many ways to do this. There's some good thought. I don't think I've got this flushed out, but some good. Carrie had mentioned too that I'd be missing out on some stats, if I in your watch time, et cetera. I don't completely understand that statement, Carrie, but there is some give and take on splitting channels. If it's a separate channel, it's got to start, you kind of start over and have all, you got to do all kinds of things to get anything out of that channel. And people won't get notified when I post new stuff. I don't know. I have to think through. It's good.
Randy says, I've had professional success creating an email sequence, learning from clients. So one email a week for specified time. So it's 8 weeks or things like that. And then he said, I'd have links to pages not publicly available on my site with specific coaching content, which is kind of like an unlisted video. If you think about it, it's an unlisted page. Each page has text and embedded audio or video. And there you go. So, which then gives it that kind of special, this is content I can't get anyplace else.
Well, and it's interesting. So my sorry to make this all about me, but I'm gonna my goal is not to sell things, it's to create community. And so and I'm not taking away from anything that's been said in the chat room, by the way.
Right.
That's creating those kinds of series and things. But I want to drive folks to each other so they can help each other with the problems, right? It's one of these things we want to create community involvement. So I always keep that kind of top of mind of like, how can I create content in a way that drives people to community? That's what's really, really important. So driving them to our Discord group or driving them to our Facebook page, Facebook group, having those conversations. So it just gets me thinking like, okay, how could I do this to continue to drive community? That's my output.
I have seen people do that with, I think it was a Mighty Network that they had, and they would send out like a weekly email. Hey, in case you missed it, Janet is looking for guests who are blah, blah, blah. So-and-so did a review of the such and such microphone. So it kind of, gives you that fear of missing out. Like, maybe I should check in there more often kind of thing. And then it was links right to whatever it was. So if you wanted to go chime in on something that somebody was asking about, it's the magic of email. It's one click away. Oh. But that was, again, kind of trying to drive people back to the group. So you might do that. You could have a newsletter that says, hey, if you're not in the Discord server, here it is. Here's what, Joe was talking about this and Angela was doing this. And so,
yeah, almost like new conversations in Discord or something like that. Here's a list of the new conversations. Welcome. Ooh, that's a good idea. Dave Jackson, nicely done. Yeah, like here's what we've been talking about this week. And this and this, join us in this group, this and this, join us in that group, maybe kind of drive some folks back to it. That's a good. Can I tell you this though? It's a lot less stressful doing a podcast when I can hear the host as opposed to like literally, I don't know, about 15 minutes ago, it just started working again for whatever reason. Like I hear you perfectly now. Like my blood pressure, I've been checking my, my heart rate on my watch, just came way down.
I'm so tempted to right now just to watch you like start freaking out again.
Yeah, it adds a little blood pressure. Well, it's nice. I mean, last week you would go for a while and then it would just slowly degrade and then you were gone. And then we get you back and slowly degrade. So
yeah. Randy says, I said the magic word, Mighty Networks. Any updates on how you feel about this for building the community? Here's the one thing that I was so Dave Jackson on this. Number one, teachers make horrible students. So that's just a given. And if there was a scale of emotional and logical, like logic is that used to, it probably, if I ever get back in a relationship, I am such a logical 1 + 1 = 2. And that doesn't mean I'm a robot. I'm actually somewhat of a romantic, but the logic part of me steers my rudder too much. And the course that I took from them was great. A lot of really good information. But he said, so of course, negating everything, it was all theory on how to build a community. And I'm like, at the end, the teacher in me is like, okay, we've talked about really knowing who your target audience is. We've talked about setting up a year's worth of material. We've talked about different weekly activities. We've talked about all these things you can do to stir the pot and get the community going. I'm ready now for the teacher to go, okay, today we're going to make a fictitious community. It's going to be Bob and Jill. Bob is doing one about triathletes and Jill is doing one for dog grooming. And now let's tie the software into all this theory. And they never did that. And I was kind of like, so, and now they were very good at saying, if you have how-to questions, they have a bunch of like help and tutorials and things like that. And I think there's even another group they have. And I might reach out to Jessica and go, can I get in that group? Because I want to connect everything together. So it's on my list of things of like, oh, I need to go watch all the help stuff. Because I understand that they have topics and they have groups, and the groups can be free or the groups can be paid for. So I like the flexibility of it. I needed something to kind of like, okay, I understand what all these ingredients do. Can we make some stew now so I can taste it and kind of, make it a little more visual for me? So it seems pretty cool. I should go get my link. I have I've been sending out in my newsletter a link to a form that has basically been asking people, he said behind the scenes, trying to find that, asking people like, what's important to you as a podcaster? And if you give me 2 seconds here, let's have some Dave. This is the Dave finding his form music, because it is interesting and it's super simple. And one thing to keep in mind when you make a form, don't do odd numbers. Like almost all of my things are how important is this to you? Scale 1 to 6. Why? Because if I did 1 through 5, people can pick 3 and go right down the middle. So you always do an even number. So they have to figure out, am I leaning a little more 3 or a little more 4 that way? But I threw that in the chat room. I'll put it out in the show notes at askthepodcastcoach.com/298. And the episode usually comes out around 2 by the time I'm done with it. That's not going to be the case today because I've got a pretty full plate today. I'm actually speaking at the I forget what they're calling it. It's not so much Utah. It's everything. Anyway, it used to be the Utah Podcast Summit, but it's online. So if you're living anywhere, you can participate. And at 12, I believe it's 12:15 today, I will be doing 45 minutes on starting your podcast. Then later, I will be at the Indie PodCon. That's Joe Pardo, Super Joe Pardo's event at 3:10. I will be talking about how to know, not guess, who you're talking to. And then I will be back in Utah, again, all this virtually, at 5:15. Those are all Eastern Standard Time, by the way, because they're Mountain Time, that was the other one. I felt like such the stupid American where I don't know my geography, because I'm thinking, oh, Utah, it's west. So I'm thinking it's, they're 3 hours behind. They're only 2 hours behind. Switch that. I hate the fact that PowerPoint always takes up the entire screen. So I'm trying to share my screen.
I should have a better transition for you on that, where I've got a little spot in there where I can say mid-show pour. Then I say a minute worth of something, so you have time to switch it up over.
To switch, I was somewhat ready, but yeah, we want to thank our awesome supporters. I still have the spot open for the teacher's pet. If you're looking for some one-on-one consulting at a discounted rate, I'd be happy to help you. And then we always thank our $20 supporters, awesome people like Greg at debtshepherd.com. So if you are getting ready to file your taxes, if you haven't done those yet, and you're like, man, I got to look into my finances for next year. Check out Greg again over at debtshepherd.com. Glenn the Geek Hebert over at horseradionetwork.com. If you got horses, go check out Glenn's whole network. He's got a gazillion shows over there all about horses. Max Trescott, if you're into aviation, he's at aviationnewstalk.com. Shane at spybrary.com. So if you're into spy kind of stuff, check that out. Carl White at Life in the Carolinas with an S, lifeinthecarolinaspodcast.com. Now that we're actually able to go out and about, if you want to go check out the Carolinas, Carl can help you out. If you're looking to come out of your shell when it comes to public speaking, check out Kim Craggy over at Toastmasters101.net. And Ed Sullivan over at the soniccupcake.com. If you're looking to get your audio edited or just make it sound just delicious, Ed can help you out with that. And we haven't thanked our $1 supporters for a while. So people like Alan Palmer, Adam Higgins at oddadoutpodcast.com, and Anthony at route66podcast.com, the Audio Dice Network at audiodice.net, Barb at anchor.fm/BarbTUSA, Brandon at the Seahawkerspodcast.com, Bumble at maskme, that's masqme.org, Craig at ingleaspodcast.com, Chris and Brandon at floridafocuspodcast.com, David at Ottawa Works, Dan at based on a true story podcast.com. I wonder, I wonder if Dan is similar to What Was That Like? Those two kind of sound like they might be similar. Coach Dave over at the soccersidelines.com. Ed Sullivan, apparently, I need to update this a bit. Emily Prokop at The Story Behind Podcast, Garrett at utrmedia.org, Gary and Margaret at beekeepingpodcast.com, the International Latin Podcast Awards. Speaking of podcast awards, find those at latinpodcastawards.com. James at creepykingdom.com, Jeff at Disney. Now, this is DIZNEY, coast2coast.com. Jason at TV times 3, that's spelled out THREE.com. Jay at I always want to say Post Stir. It's potstirpodcast.com. John at soberspeak.com. Kyle at leveluptech.com. Lucas at triangletactical.net. Josh Liston at onthebubblepodcast.com. Mark, speaking of Mark, at resourcefuldesigner.com. That's also the guy behind the podcastbranding.co. Mike at CreatePod, a podcast about the art of podcasting at createpodatx.com. Matt at Blue Ribbon Podcast. Patrick at bigseancepodcast.com. Paul at fightingthroughpodcast.co.uk. Randall at randallblack.com. Ryle Davis Jr. Steve at earn.show. Sean at clarinet.com. So if you're into clarinets, that's a fun show. Wayne Henderson at mediavoiceovers.com. You can hear Wayne if you listen to the latest episode of the podcast review show. That's Wayne. And of course, Cody Sison. I think, nope, we got one more. Zach at seriousaboutTech.com. So if you'd like to be an awesome supporter, simply go over to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome. So thank you to all of our supporters. And now Jim is over there. Now he's over here. Okay. It's always fun. It's one of those where you're like, you start the PowerPoint and you're like, oh, I needed it on that screen. And So I was moving things around and
Dave, I'm noticing, speaking of StreamYard, I've been in their group. They have been getting what started as a very simple tool that everybody loved. They're starting to get some hate in their Facebook groups around like, why are we not getting 1080? Why are we not getting more scene? I mean, StreamYard has not really changed since it launched for the most part, right? I mean, there's
they've added some icing on the cake, but
little tiny things, right? But it's kind of interesting as they've gotten real popular. The inside their Facebook group, it's gotten, I don't want to say nasty because that's probably too strong, but it's gotten strong in there about, I know you can always hear the passive aggressive Facebook posts, right? I know I've been telling Gage forever that we need to have 1080, you know, kind of thing. And it's always kind of an interesting, you know, when you create something that works and gets really, really popular, you're going to have, and I guess this is warning for anybody who wants to start a podcast and let that podcast get popular. Your fringe audience gets very, very vocal. Like they just get incredibly vocal out there. And StreamYard works great. Like we use the heck out of it now. We're on the paid plan at work. And it's just fantastic. But how hard is that to kind of resist this urge to kind of add on and add on and add on and add on, and then you have Microsoft Word, right? Which is like 8,000 different options, or you have Adobe Premiere, or you have like where it takes a set of videos to learn how to use one tool. Where basically in StreamYard today, kind of jump in there. Although the other fringe of users for this is the ones who come in and say, like, how do I open a web page?
Yeah.
Like, yikes. Like you're doing podcasting and you can't figure out a few simple, you know, browser things. So it's kind of crazy to watch it get some hate in the community.
Yeah. I'd mentioned Dan Show. What was that like? And Dan Show is not really, his show is based on a true story, is, as you might imagine, it's about movies that are based on a true story. So like he's talking about, he had a chat with the senior curator at a World War I museum about how much of 1917 really happened. That was have you seen that movie?
I have not. I need to.
It's interesting.
It's a single shot, right? The whole movie is one
That's the
shot.
fun thing. I watched it, I think on Amazon, and the behind the scenes of that on how they did that is pretty amazing because it's and speaking of adding things, Daniel says, has anyone tried Zencaster's new video option? Because that was my thought when I saw that. I was like, did you guys finally get audio to work? You know, I mean, I have one client that uses Zencaster and she just uses it to record herself. Because I'm like, you could like Audacity, what, you know, again, going back to some people, hey, if it works for you, Zencaster.
Well, I use StreamYard to do our church. You know, I mentioned I do our church announcements. I just I go in and do a recording, you know, and I just use this, and I've got some options on some things good enough for what I'm doing. And so that, you know, that's what I use. There's a variety of things I could use, but StreamYard works pretty well for that.
Yeah. There's also Riverside.fm. I have not played with that yet. I've heard about it though. And I've heard a lot of people talking about CleanFeed lately, that depending on how many interviews you do, it might be more cost effective to use CleanFeed, because I think if I remember right, I know I get 10 hours a month, I think, on Squadcast. So I think it depends on what you're doing. And I know Zencaster has a free version, but you only get MP3s as opposed to WAV files and that whole 9 yards. So, and there you go. And then, I forget I want to say his name is Roger, but I don't think that's it. I met the guy from Zencaster at Podcast Movement a couple years ago. Jeremy says our editor made us stop using Zencaster. Haven't tried it in at least a year because of that. He did have a problem for a bit, and that's, boy, all it takes is, you know, 1 second to take a step back, and that's kind of when Squadcast came in just at the right time. And you know, it's one of those things where you kind of only get one chance to. Josh, thank you, Daniel said from Zencaster. So it is one of those things, and that's why I always try to stay consistent with my podcast, because I'm always afraid, and it's probably not true, but I always think if I give you 1 week where I'm not here, it's not like you're not listening to shows on Saturday. you're going to find something else to listen to. So
yeah, we had such a meltdown. So Thursday, I was having all these issues with Home Gadget Geeks, and it just it melted down on me like last week melted down on you. And fortunately, Mike Uyghur, my co-host on Home Gadget Geeks, had 3 or 4 topics lined up that he wanted to talk about. And so I kept disappearing, and it was just so weird, like our Saturday show. It was almost like a carbon copy. What happened to me happened to you on Saturday. So I kind of took a page. I thought, well, Mike can handle this. So I didn't panic. I just kept kind of trying to fix some things. And we, at the end, after about an hour, we had really about 35 minutes of content after I cut out all the, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Are we okay? Are we back? Am I back? Right. And you just did that for last week. Right.
Yeah.
And so I had this thought, like, do I put this out this week? It's just 35 minutes. Normally we're an hour and some change, but it was content, and I guess it's better than nothing, right? In what Mike did was good, so yeah, I guess in some regards, maybe it'll just be, it's better than having a blank, because I just took a week off 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And so, am I skipping for you, or am I still standing okay?
No, you're okay. Absolutely fine.
You started going back to the jittery for me, so it's just
which means you'll get kicked out in about a minute and a half. Is the way this is
coming up. It's coming up. It's coming up.
Here's a question from Facebook. It says, "Hey, what companies are sponsoring niche podcasts right now? My show's in an interview format with graphic designers. I'm looking for new sponsors that would be relevant to my listeners. I average around 1,000 downloads per episode and have a mailing list of around 3,500. And this is just one of those, I don't know if people overthink this or what, but Jim, what would you say to this? I know I got my answer.
You know what? I only heard like half of that question.
All right. Well, the question is advertising on a niche podcast. Yeah. And so what I would say in this case, he's a graphic artist guy. He's got about 1,000 downloads an episode. I would Google the phrase graphic design convention event, something like that. Someplace that, because the easy one you would think is Adobe. But like if I was doing, like this show, if I was looking for a sponsor, I would go out to Podcast Movement, because that's an event for podcasters, and see who sponsors that show, because there's a pretty good, chance that if they want to get to podcasters, well, hey, guess what? I have some over here, and it's more than once a year. So, that's one thing you could do. So if I'm a graphic, podcast, try to find out anywhere where there's some sort of graphic event, whether that be a convention or a online meetup or something. And if there's any kind of, sponsors for that, reach out and say, hey, I've got, here's my audience. I see. And then you can even see, I see in the past where you've sponsored this. And the other thing that does is it shows you at least that they have a budget, because that's the other thing you're looking for. So Jeremy says, we have a monthly contest sponsored by a small company in our niche that makes replacement stickers for toys. That's awesome. They give us a $10 gift certificate to give away. It's worth it just to ask. Exactly. I guess that's my thing. It's like, find somebody if I was in this case, Jason, what are you using? Because that's to me the best place to start. Some tool that you're using would be great, because then you can talk about it from firsthand knowledge and go from there. So that would be my advice. I just feel bad because Jim has no idea what I'm saying.
I hear most of it. I hear most of it. It was a pretty complex question, and when you miss a few words in there, you're like, matters. I don't know. I got nothing.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy brought up, he said they have a monthly contest, which is great, because somebody else asked in Facebook. Scott said, in the past, I've seen some done for you social media campaigns, like announce a big prize and your followers can get in the drawing. Each person gets so many entries for a Facebook post or a tweet, rating, review. All of these details are handled by a third-party company who organizes and tracks everything for a fee. Who has done this, and who did you hire to handle it? And the one that I know of is called King Sumo. It's part of the whole AppSumo kind of family, but King Sumo has a pretty cool system that you can use if you want to do a giveaway. The thing that we were talking earlier about things that you want to do, but you never do. And one of mine is I need to look into the legalities of a contest, because I know there are certain rules you have to watch and be careful for, and things like that. I'm always like, I should look into that. And then I never do. And then consequently, I usually don't have any giveaways. So
I kind of quit doing giveaways just for that reason, because it was this like, they get complicated. If I got to the point where I made sure if they were shipping product, they just shipped it. But then you get a global, you have a global problem. Like, okay, what if somebody from Australia wins it? Are they willing to ship something across, the ocean to get there, kind of thing? So I kind of quit doing those kinds of giveaways just because they got kind of complicated. And like Bits, or like Bangs says, Bangs and Bits, sweepstakes laws vary from country to country, and so it got a little like, I don't know, it's worth it. And somebody asked, I think Daniel asked earlier, Dave, how you feel about sponsors for your podcast? Like, think of Mark, who's sponsoring now. Are you like, he's in the podcasting space? Obviously, you're okay with him being, what do you think about that?
It's kind of weird. Let me back that up a second. It could be weird, because here's the thing. What if Mark decides, hey, I'm not going to redo it, and we go back and we do another auction. And the person that wins is, and I'm just going to pick him randomly, Colin. Help me. Colin from Scotland, the podcast host, Colin Gray, wins. Okay, he's a direct competitor of me. Now, I love Colin, but I'm now promoting my competitor on my own show. And I'm like, buddy won the auction. And I'm like, so I need to put a link in there that says, I reserve the right to, blah, blah, blah. I reserve the right to not let you win because, blah, blah, blah. So that's what's kind of weird. I always feel weird about the School of Podcasting stuff, because like right now I have Focusrite. They actually bought 3 months of sponsorship. So that was kind of hard to turn down, and they fit. That's another one where it fits my audience. It's not a competitor, so I'm okay with that. I know Memberful is knocking at my door because they're sponsoring every podcast there is. And I asked them to give me a demo, and they did. And it seems pretty cool, but it is one of those things where I'm like, the thing that really for me was a red flag is I had Danny Osment from Emerald City Productions as a sponsor of my show. Again, fit my audience. If you need editing, go see Danny. And then I forget who I was talking to, and they knew more about Danny's business than the School of Podcasting. And I went, that's a problem. I need to start openly promoting people, letting people know, what do you get, at the School of Podcasting. So I don't really promote the School of Podcasting here, besides just the fact that I say that's where I'm from. And that whole 9 yards. Here I'm promoting the Patreon thing, basically. But Carrie, we did an auction, well, I guess 2 months ago, as a joke, because, not as a joke. It was like, hey, let's see what happens. And Jim had said we should have somebody sponsor the Morning Pour. And so I found a WordPress plugin that allows you to do auctions. And I'm like, we'll start the bidding at $20. And it got up to 77, and Mark won. And then it was a matter of like, okay, are we going to do a sponsored or a auction every month? And I think it was Jim that said, how about we let Mark have first rights at it? You can stay. It's almost like let's make a deal. You can stay with the current plan you have, or, send it back to auction and see if you can, but it might go higher, it might go lower.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a fun little, it's Dave doing what he does, which is, hey, let's play with this and see what happens. So,
well, it's been a good experiment. Like, I've learned a ton from it. And I tried implementing some of it on Home Gadget Geeks, and it didn't work. It's just a different audience, and it's a different size audience, a different level of engagement. And so but it has certainly, from my perspective of thinking about, okay, what is an ad worth? People ask this all the time in our community when they think, this coaching community that I kind of help manage for Gallup. And they're like, what should I charge? What should my hourly rate be? Well, it's whatever someone's willing to pay, to be honest with you. How much is a used car worth? It's worth what will give you money for, right? In this case, Dave, now it's a one-time experiment at this point in time. Like, you wouldn't want to write a book about it, but all of a sudden, $75 seems to be a good monthly, like, okay, that's kind of where it got to. Now, is that really the rate? I don't know. We'd have to do some additional work to kind of see, what else fits. But for this show in this slot doing this thing, if you were ever going to do a flat rate and say, okay, let's start at 75, that would to me, that would seem to be the right rate to go. And you have to kind of mess around with that a little bit. But don't you think? I mean, it was a good experiment. Learned a few things. We got kind of got sort of a level.
Yeah, and I would love to take credit for that. That actually came from Greg Fitzsimmons, who's a comedian. And when he first started his podcast, he didn't have any sponsors, and he sold his on eBay. He had an eBay auction and did it that way and got like $300 for like one episode. He was just like, hey, let's see what we can get for it, and kind of went from there. And some episodes it was 60, and then other episodes it was 150, and it kind of went up and down. And I think it was just a matter of, I think he quit because you then have to keep promoting the auction in addition to promoting who won the auction. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, this takes a while. But Carrie says, yeah, this would be a fun thing for her Key West perspective, because I'm not really in it for the sponsorship money, but I bet my local network would be up for it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially locally, because that's people are there, they're looking for local traffic and things like that. So it's right in the neighborhood. So,
well, it was fun, Dave. Like, I mean, it generated some interest in this, right? And some other folks. And so, it also, for you, there were other people involved in the auction. And if we were ever going to create another spot somewhere in the show,
right,
there's a list of folks to say, hey, are you interested in this spot? And we'll promote you there. And so you've got kind of created a list, and probably not a very big list, but a list of potential sponsors for other posts. So Carrie, you'll have to, if you do try it out, let us know how it goes. Love to hear. Maybe we can have you on and talk a little bit about your experience with it. It's the way kind of internet advertising works on a bid system, right? It's nothing new. This is just a micro version of it, and it was kind of fun. It worked out. I always appreciate Mark for being excited about it, and hopefully we're driving some interest to him. Every week I hear it, by the way. I think I should contact Mark and have him give me a bid on redoing. I don't want to change it, but I do want to think through, like, I would want to meet with Mark and think, okay, I've got this logo that's been really successful for me. What else could I do with it? And get some advice, and pay him to give me some really good advice, or even to rework. Like, I don't have all of the logos now because of the way they were created in the various, I've been using the same stuff for like 6 years. I don't have it in all the formats that I need for maybe Twitter or YouTube or Eventbrite, right? And he just may have some great thoughts on, like, hey, here's some different ways. I love, he did the branding behind you, right?
This
that'd have been really embarrassing if he hadn't.
Yeah. Like, no, that's actually, Jill. No, that's he created the new School of Podcasting logo.
Yikes. I just realized that. I was like, oh, well, as soon as I let that question go, I was like, come back.
He did that, and he did the podcast rodeo shows, new artwork.
Yeah.
So, and I have one on order for a show I'm doing about building community. I want to go back to your question of, like, how do I know what to charge? Going back to the Mighty Networks course I took, and she said one of the things you can do is look at, okay, what if somebody didn't come to you? So, like, like for Jim, you're doing what? Like I want to say life coach, but I hate that phrase because it sounds
strengths coach.
Strengths coach. There you go. So if somebody doesn't go to one of your strengths coach, then you have somebody who is, I was going to say weak, but that's not the right phrase, but they're struggling doing something. And so they're either going to go buy a couple books, they're going to go, I don't know, whatever, they're going to buy another course or things like that. And it's a matter of when it comes to selling something, 9 times out of 10, you are transforming somebody from something to something. Whether it's Carrie, taking somebody from, well, I don't have a photographer for my wedding, and after you pay me, you're going to have your memories forever in this format. I've transformed you from no memories to memories. Or if I'm a strength coach, if I actually go like gym coach, I'm going to transform you from somebody who is a 90-pound weakling to, a strong person. So it's a matter of how much it's like you said, to go back to what you said, how much is that work to that person? And it's hard because Carrie says, why would I not keep doing the auction? There is still that part of you that goes, I don't want to be too advertising. I don't want to like be just sell kind of thing. But on the other hand, this podcast, I've had people say, wow, I listened to that show and it really helped my show. So, okay, well, you're getting value. Maybe I should get some value for that. So, but that's something to think about when it comes to pricing. And then I love the Jessica Kupferman model. She was like, okay, so you're going to do sponsorship. Great. What about $20? And somebody go, well, I don't know. I was thinking I was going to get more than that. Okay. What about $100? Yeah, maybe. Okay. What about 150? Oh, no, I don't know that I can deliver value. My audience isn't quite okay. Well, so like, what about 80? Is that good? 90? And eventually you go, yeah, I think that would work. And you're like, okay, that's how you pick your price. Just kind of keep going until you get uncomfortable, and then you get comfortable, and then you start there.
Yeah, I think she had said right where that question where it's so low, you go, oh, I would never do it for that little, and then so high you're uncomfortable, and then kind of land in between, right? That's kind of I think that was kind of the gist of the conversation.
Yeah, and then I like my buddy Joe Salsihigh from Stacking Benjamins. He said he kept raising his prices until he heard a no. Yeah. And he said, when I heard no, I knew, okay, I'm not leaving money on the table anymore. So that's another strategy. Although we hate that because you're like, ooh, if I'd come in a little less, then maybe I would have done. It's like, yeah, but at least now you're getting to that right spot. So
yeah, I did that myself, Dave. That was for when I was doing podcast editing and the consulting stuff. Yeah, I picked an hourly rate, and then for every customer, it was $10 more. And so I just kept raising it until someone was like, no, and I wouldn't go, oh, well, how about $10 less? Maybe I should have, but when I started getting constant feedback, then I knew I'd kind of reached the threshold of the price.
Yeah. Hey, in the post show, we're going to talk about this new service called Pod Hero. And Jim, what's coming up on the AverageGuy.tv?
Yeah, we spent some time. Mike Uyghur takes over the show because my internet connection doesn't work. And we talked a little bit about this. He upgraded his modem as well as this week because we were having some technical problems. So if you want to spend a little time thinking about your internet connection, Home Gadget Geeks over at the AverageGuy.tv.
And the School of Podcasting is going to be one of two things. It's either going to be my interview with Brennan from Podpage. If you want to check out Podpage, go to schoolofpodcasting.com/Podpage. That's my affiliate link. Or it's going to be all about strategies to grow your podcast. That one is simmering. Not sure if it's ready to pull out of the oven yet, but that's the plan, at least at this point, is that's going to be that one. I have a really interesting tip from Scott Johnson from whatwasthatlike.com. And I had that one. I said, hey, can you come on and just share that tip? And I was like, all right, well, that's not going to fill up a half hour. So what are we going to do? So I thought, I'll go out and find some more. So that's coming up in the future on the School of Podcasting. But we're going to talk a little Pod Hero in just a second. Thanks to the chat room. Thanks to the awesome supporters. Stick around for some post show. Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have seen the Pod Hero thing yet, and I guess I'm looking to me, Jim, do you ever have that thing where you're like, I don't want to be the old curmudgeon? Like, like I don't want to like everything new that comes out. I don't want to go, no, that's dumb. It's like I want to be open to new ideas and things like that. But here's the thing I did not get. Well, first of all, when you sign up, they keep saying we don't cost anything. We take no fees. But when you go to claim your account, they want your credit card, and it's set to bill your credit card $1 a month. And I'm like, So I was like, that's kind of odd that you keep saying you don't take any money, but you want. And again, I'm complaining about $1, but it's not the buck. It's the fact that you keep saying you don't take any fees, and apparently you do. And so what's interesting about this is, what is Pod Hero? They say, well, it's 97% of podcasts don't make any money. And this is all about ads. And that's true. A lot of podcasters, because ads, in my opinion, is like one of the worst ways to make money with a podcast. How does Pod Hero help me? Well, users contribute $4.99 a month to be divided amongst all the shows they're supporting. So if I like 4 shows and I'm subscribed to 4 shows and I give them $5, everybody gets $1.25 in theory. And I was like, okay, the more your listeners, the more of your listeners that use Pod Hero, the more money you make. Telling your listeners about Pod Hero is the easiest way to make revenue. And to that, I go, when I start telling people you have to use a different app to listen to your podcast, and they have on a Medium article said, nope, you don't have to listen to Pod Hero, but you do have to go to Pod Hero to, I guess, subscribe at least once. Then this one I thought was interesting. How does Pod Hero help podcasters get new listeners? When someone listens to an episode of your show on Pod Hero, they have the ability to recommend it. And is it just me, or do I want to go, oh, you mean like the share button on Apple Podcasts, or the share button on Overcast, or the share button on, like, really? I don't know. To me, it was just like, with enough of these recommendations, your episode will move up the trending list. Oh, good. Because I was hoping we'd get some sort of chart to go up where even more people will see it. You'll also get a small boost in money each month when someone recommends an episode of yours. They don't say how much. How do I claim my show? Yada, yada, yada. Can I use Pod Hero if my show has ads? Yep. I'm currently using Patreon. Can I use that? Yep. How do I get my money? You connect your bank account or debit card, and you have to get $20. Well, if you have one subscriber, that's $4.99 a month. That means you're gonna have to wait 4 months to get paid. So that's what I was like, I will say this, especially, I don't know if they have Spain. Yep, Spain. So where I'm not sure how global Patreon is, but they're available in more things than the US. So that was when I was like, yay. Do I have to do extra work like I have to do with Patreon? I thought this was interesting. Absolutely not. We don't believe you have to make bonus content to justify asking your listeners for support, because they're going to give you money for nothing. And I was like, how do I tell my listeners about Pod Hero? Open your mouth. What's the catch? This sounds too good to be true. There is no catch, yada, yada, yada. But there's a thing on Medium, and I'm not sure if I go there now, if I can find it. But he says they capped it. They capped the donations at, let's see what he just said, $5.99. And so what's interesting about that is they again say, which is interesting, because there was an app called Swoot that has now been turned into Pod Hero. Oh, I can't find it. I looked at it yesterday, but anyway, they say the maximum donation is $5.99, and we don't take any fees. But when the listener gives us $5.99, $4.99 of that goes to the podcaster, and then we take $1. And I'm like, well, that sure sounds like you're taking part of the money then. So it's really odd. I left a comment that kind of like, hey, don't try to like do the shell game with me. If you're going to take $1, which by the way, if you take $1 out of every 6, that's 17%. And that's a heck of a lot more than, yeah, the easiest way to support creators. And so I think part of my issue was the fact of just the wording. Here again, he's going through, and let me put this in the chat room. But I just felt like I was the old curmudgeon again that was kind of going, why not just use PayPal? And again, he's all about, you can't make it with ads. Yeah, that's true. I'm not disagreeing with that. Patreon takes an 8% cut. And introducing Pod Hero. Yeah, each month your $5.99 a month subscription is divided and shared amongst people. So $5.99, and then down there they say, we don't take a cut. We're proud to charge podcast creators 0 fees. Instead, we ask listeners to support Pod Hero for $1 a month. So $4.99 goes to the podcast and $1 for Pod Hero. And that's the part that I went, do you really think I'm that dumb? I was like, just be honest and say we need $1 to stay in business. I don't know. So that's Pod Hero. Thoughts, Mr. Cullison? Am I being too curmudgeon-y?
No, I think you're bringing up some interesting points on that. I mean, you might be making too big of a deal about them saying they're not taking a cut and they're, the dollar. They got to support themselves somehow. And according to your kind of, when we think about companies that are free, like, okay, just tell them, hey, let's just be honest about this. We need some money to survive. So like, it doesn't need to be that maybe stated that way, or because you're saying that, maybe it's confusing. Dan
brings up a good point. It's right there. It's in the same paragraph. We made the $1 to Pod Hero support optional. All right. Well, that's much better then.
Yeah. When you sign in, you can set that. I was just going to the sign in to look at that. It's another attempt at finding ways to kind of support podcasters if podcasters like could see something through this and they're new, they may start saying, hey, subscribe on Pod Hero, and if you want to support the show, subscribe and listen through Pod Hero. I don't see anything wrong with that. It still gives the listener a choice if they want to go over and do it that way. I'm assuming they're doing that like the old ratings, where the more listens you get on Pod Hero, the more
money you make, I guess.
More money you make, something like that.
Yeah. So I if I can turn off that dollar thing, I'm like, okay. To me, that just seemed weird. Like, we don't take anything, but when this person pays $6, we take one. And I'm like, it sounds to me like you're taking the fees, but it's optional. I'm like, oh, okay. So I get that. That's a little better. For me, like, if I can inspire somebody to donate to my podcast, why not just use PayPal, Patreon?
Well, this is easy though. The listeners don't have to do anything.
Well, they have to take the same steps they would if they donated on PayPal, right? You still have to click a button and so. But on one hand, I'm like, okay, it's another one. I'm going to pop the popcorn and see how it works. So, I'll be interested to see, because I guess on one hand, where with Patreon you have to figure out, okay, I'm going to give, Clay from Fish Nerds $5 a month. I'm going to give Dave $2 a month. I'm going to give Jim $10 a month. I'm going to give Jordan, $15 a month. This, you just give one fee and it just goes to everybody you listen to, which again is kind of weird. Like, okay, if Jim does a daily show, so he gets 7 listens a week, and I do a weekly show, does Jim get 7 times as much money?
Yeah.
That just, to me, I was like, there's all sorts of ways this could get really, and my inner Cyndi Lauper voice was screaming, money changes everything. And I'm like, this is going to make, if getting recommended gives you a boost in money, oh, sure. Nobody's going to come up with a bot that's going to make me recommend automatically. I'm just like, so I'm kind of like, hey, okay, new idea. Let's see how this works. I also found out that, I think it was a couple weeks ago, I said with glow.fm, if you're getting patrons at more than $13 a month, you make more money on glow.fm. That radically changed, because it used to be you could have 55 cents per premium subscriber. They now have a monthly fee. So they're I got to do the math on Memberful and glow.fm and things like that. So that was one that I was like, wait, whoa, they went from like almost charging nothing to now you have a monthly fee, which if you listen to Rob and Todd, a lot of these tech companies, it's not the bandwidth that they're paying for. It's all the developers and the tech guys that are keeping the technology working behind the scenes. Randy says direct to consumer or listener versus external distribution. Which one is best for you, whomever you are? I'm all about direct to consumer for myself. Yeah, that's me. I'm kind of like, why do I need a middleman? But if it makes it easier, I guess, for the listener to support all their shows. But that's like another one is Good Pods. Have you played with that podcast yet?
I have not. No.
It's interesting because you can kind of see who's listening. And if I listen to a really good podcast, I will go over into Good Pods and say, I listen to this show. So other people who might be looking for something good, but I'm not going to leave, my Overcast. And I think I asked somebody, can I somehow share things into Overcast as opposed to having to go into Good Pods, find the show, find the episode, and click play so people can see that I listened to it. And I was like, I get it. I kind of do it because I want that show to be found, but I just, is there like a 2-click way of doing this as opposed to 7? So I don't know. So it'll be fun to watch. I know they somehow bought Swoot, which I guess was and that's kind of how I first found them. Is there was a link in the feed. I was looking for a link that Elsie had talked about, and she had a link to Swoot, which was some sort of app, and now apparently got bought by Pod Hero, and so it should be, So apparently they now have a user base, which I'm kind of glad. At least they didn't go and scrape all the emails from Apple and send us a bunch of spam. At least they haven't yet. I have not heard of this. Dan says it sounds. I understood it. It was basically being what Brave was trying to do with Bat. I don't know what that is. Not a new concept. It works great, but it probably won't. So if you can expand on what Brave and
I think that's their cryptocurrency where you would get, I think I'll let him explain. I think that's the cryptocurrency option there.
Yeah. But, if you guys, I don't say this enough. If you have a question, you can always jump in and, chime on in and fill it in. The Brave browser.
Yeah. It was a reward system, that you could, and it basically BAT stands for basic attention tokens, right? It was an idea of creating, for the time you spent, you could get some cryptocurrency credit. I mean, crypto there's a lot of weird things about crypto, but it would be a great way for a reward system online. Like this is, I think in the future, that's probably how cryptocurrency is going to be used. It just is a great way of doing those kinds of things. Yeah. And so I think I owned because I'm a Coinbase user, which is a cryptocurrency kind of repository. You could go watch videos, and for every video they'd give you 5 BAT. And so again, a way to reward you, and they're not worth very much, but yeah. So this is the same kind of setting. Like I've said this before, and I think the last one to try this, kind of a listener-based reward system, who gets the most listens, gets the most credit using a back end of a cryptocurrency. I think it's viable. I just don't know if you're going to get audiences to shift. Like this is the hard part. They would need some reason to shift onto those things.
Yeah. Anytime somebody comes up and says, "Hey, I want to show you this new podcast app," I just look at them and say, your hardest thing you're going to have to do is you shouldn't be targeting podcast listeners. You need to target people who are not listening to podcasts so that your app is the first one they find, because most people stick with the first one. I mean, I stuck with Apple Podcast for years until it just didn't work. And then the next one I found was Overcast, and I'm not moving. It's I've got all sorts of custom settings in Overcast to where I'm just not going to leave. Bang says the Brave guy was the CEO of Mozilla and was booted / forced to resign because he was a Mormon. Well, that's not very nice. And then Daniel says Brave browser is essentially Chrome with built-in privacy protection and ad blocking. I switched to it when Chrome announced ad blockers would work differently. Didn't know that. So
yeah, you can use Brave and it works because it's Chromium. By the way, the new Edge is Chromium as well. So if you're on a Microsoft platform and you're your mom or dad who you support, because it's going to be default. They've probably been using IE as their default browser.
That's sad.
Well, it is, but so now
It
we have
is.
the new Edge, and the new Edge is Chromium based. So it's with everything, almost everything's on Chrome at this point as far as the back end goes. So it's messy. It's all messy, but at least it's not Internet Explorer anymore for sure. And it's not the old Edge. The old Edge was pretty bad. Poor Microsoft. They just can't get out of their own way.
Well, it's interesting because if you think about it, at one point they were being sued for being a monopoly.
I know.
With Internet Explorer.
Isn't that funny? That how far
they've tumbled. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's tough. It doesn't work. Nothing works on it now. You shouldn't be using IE for anything.
No,
it's unsupported. It's like, it's the interesting thing is in the enterprise, because a lot of enterprises have different, they just operate their OS is different and they're a little bit farther behind. And so I've noticed if I'm helping somebody on a work computer and they're using the default browser, in a lot of cases it's IE. And I'm like, why is not gone? Like, why have administrators not removed that from Windows 10 or whatever? Because it's an unsupported browser. It's not secure. It's got all kinds of problems with it. But I think its days are numbered. The new Windows 10 updates, it's completely removed, and hopefully we won't see any more IE 11 or IE at all show up anymore.
That would be nice because it doesn't happen a lot, but there are on occasion when somebody be like, "Hey, I did this, and the podcast player is not showing up," and then you look at your screenshot and you're like, "Oh my God, they're using Internet Explorer." I'm like, "What are you doing?" So
yeah. Yeah, Bang says has county websites that are still IE only that lawyers have to use. That's unfortunate. It shouldn't be that way. It should not be that way. So that's
and I kind of then wonder, like, why would Microsoft? I guess because they have to have a browser. Like, why would you then? Like, I guess because you have to have one. Like, if they just took Chrome and put their name on it, I'm like,
well, that's what they did. I mean, in a sense, they basically ripped out the Edge engine and put in Chromium, and then kind of built around it, removed all of Google's tracking stuff, but then put their own in.
Right, exactly. Hey, you can't track their stuff. That's our job.
That's our job to do that. Yeah. It's an unfortunate, the world of browsers is not clean. Eileen says they have to use IE at work because of Oracle. Well, thank you, Oracle. Like, hey, could you keep up and could you maybe join us in the modern world?
Maybe
in some of those things. They just, there's a lot of complicated reasons why this stuff has to be what it is. But it's the browser world is still as interesting as it's ever been. It's not quite as visible as it used to be, but it's what's happening in the browser world is an interesting place. And of course, people are worried about being spied on and, tracking information and some of those things.
And Chrome is such a memory hog. There's a extension. I had it installed for a little bit that would somehow like give back the memory that each tab was using. And once you went to that tab, it would kind of wake up. So it was a way to not have, because there are times when my computer just starts acting funky and I'm like, what the heck? And I go into Task Manager and I've got 80 million versions of Chrome open. And I'm like, how is that? I'm like, so you close Chrome and you still have a bunch of this, okay, time to reboot or whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah, good job, Dan. Way to distract the whole show onto the browser. Well, I mean, from a podcasting perspective, is we're thinking like StreamYard only works on Chrome. So if you're working with folks and they're not, I now we use StreamYard 100% for the stuff that we use. Every once in a while, I'll have somebody try it that on IE because it still exists in some corporate images.
Right.
And so they're like, oh, it's not working. And you're like, okay, what browser are you using? And they're like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like they don't even know. They're like,
I've had people with that on a Mac who are just used to using Safari for everything. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to send you a link to StreamYard. Please use Chrome. And they're like, oh, like, where do I get Chrome? And I'm like, what? Like, huh?
I
I'm like,
know,
I just
I
use
know.
Safari for everything. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
all right. Yeah, here it's,
Well, and there's a little bit of a backlash against Google's version of Chrome. So there's Chrome and Chromium and some other stuff, but let's just to make this simple, we'll say Google's version of Chrome. So the Chrome browser, let's say. There's a lot of backlash because of tracking and privacy and all those pieces. And so there's a whole group of people who are refusing to use Chrome or the Chrome browser because of those pieces and have moved to Firefox or whatever. Edge is saying, hey, we're an alternative. Brave is another kind of alternative third party to it. So it'll be interesting to see if how numbers on the Chrome browser stand up over time. I mean, it's certainly dominant today. I'm sure it's the number one. I don't know the numbers, but it'd be interesting to see if that slips. We know from history, just because it's the biggest today doesn't mean it's going to be the biggest forever. So,
well, and I'd be interested to see, like, I know I saw somebody on Facebook that said, wow, the results are so different when you go to DuckDuckGo than Google.
Yeah, it's another one.
And it's like, so does this mean Edge is going to give different, result, or not Edge, but like,
well, Bing would be the Microsoft equivalent. Yeah.
So I was like, because it all depends on, because I've had people say that they'll email me and like, hey, when I Google my show, it doesn't come up. And I'm like, that is not a Libsyn problem. That's a Google issue. But even then I can go and Google and their show will come right up. And it's like, it kind of depends on what's going on with your browser and your history and what you've been looking at. And there's all sorts of things that Google will now put into the
end of the show pour.
End of the show pour. Here we go.
Yeah, well, and Brett's right in the chat room. WebRTC is driving adoption, Chrome adoption, and the others are having to catch up. I think that part is very true.
Here's another fun little tool that's it's kind of it's like Google Docs for it's that AppSumo right now. Let me see if I can go back and share this. And I kind of looks cool. I guess if I was doing editing, it reminds me a little bit of what you call it. SoundCloud used to have the ability, well, they still do, just nobody's using it. The ability to leave kind of notes. You basically can upload from Dropbox or Google Drive, and then you go in and you basically can leave notes. And so I don't do a lot of editing. I still have a couple clients, and there would be a bit of a ramp up if I was going to use this to like, hey, just any notes that you want me to edit or whatever, they're here. And right now it's $39 lifetime. Now it's only up to X amount of I forget what they call it, projects or something like that. So once one was over, they also do video. But I was kind of like, $39 for 10 projects, up to 5 gigabytes of storage. So you could basically upload it, edit it, that whole 9 yards. But it was just one of those that I watched the video on this, and it very much looks like a Google Doc, only you're in you're in audio, and you can actually listen to it right there on the web. So if somebody was doing a show that they have, here's the opening 17-second clip, instead of saying it's at the 8-minute and 27-second mark, they could actually go right there and say, hey, use this for the clip. And I was like, so if you're doing any kind of editing, I'm tempted to pull the trigger on this just for giggles.
Yeah, it's a good idea. This week, I got a new video editor. My current video editor has gone on sick leave. And so I got a new guy who has never edited our stuff before. And you kind of forget how important the relationship between the content creator and the video editor is when it's two different people, because I literally had to never say, I got to the point, he's been my editor for 6 years. I never had to say anything. In fact, I would leave him verbal notes in the video file. So I would say, we'd get done, and I'd be like, hey, Roy, can you do this, this, and this? That was it. That's all I had to do. Well, you get a new guy who doesn't know those things and doesn't know how it works, and we're behind because we got 2 weeks behind on some editing. So I had a meeting with him this week, and as we were talking through the process, I realized, oh no, like I'm gonna have to explain. Like it's like picking up or purchasing services from a new video vendor. You got to kind of get all those things worked out again. And so I had to put a spreadsheet together that was like, all right, here's the start, here's the stop, and here's some notes, and here's the information for the lower third. We don't do a lot, but it was still enough that I kind of needed to come up with a spreadsheet. So this would be an interesting way. I basically did that in a, Google, or I think I used Excel for this. We did it in a spreadsheet, but this would be a great way to add notes right in the video file. Right.
Yeah. It's pretty slick.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold up my phone here. There's a new podcast I just found called Podcast Editors Mastermind at podcasteditorsmastermind.com. And it's basically like 4 podcasters talking about, like, the last guy is from Seattle, and you hear him talk about how he went from charging $30 an episode to $100 an episode because he just realized, oh, if I'm actually going to do this for a living, I have to pay taxes. And the fact that he realized that there's going to come a point when he can't be the only editor, and so how to bring on people and things like that. It was really interesting. It's not something I think I'll be, binging on because it doesn't really apply to what I'm doing, but it's if you're in that boat, they've got some interesting stuff. And of course, they're all part of Steve Stewart's podcast editors group. So they talk about that a lot. They talk about Grandpa Steve. I thought that was pretty funny, or Father Steve or something like that. So I don't know. Editing is one of those things I did at the early days when I started off in podcasting because I was just doing anything to make money. But to me, there's nothing more painful than having to edit a podcast that you wouldn't listen to in a million years. Like, it's just, whatever, it's knitting and you don't have any idea to knit. And you're just like, wow, only 48 more minutes of this to go through. And it's like, so. What are we sharing?
So if you think your day is bad,
what is that?
So this is like a flooded data center. Maybe we were talking about Bitcoin a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe even a Bitcoin mining farm that got flooded out, and they've pulled all the components out. So if you, I'll end it with this because I'm getting a headache trying to put all your words together. It's like I stop breathing when we podcast this way because it's so intense. If you think you're having a bad day like we've had today, just remember other people have had bad days as well. There is literally, this is probably hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment that got flooded out. So there you go. Just your day is never as bad.
It could be a whole lot worse. Holy cow.
A listener sent that to me.
The good news is you'll have your internet next week. I'll have my internet next week.
Oh, I hope so.
It'll be stress-free.
So. Yeah. The Cox says, hey, if we come out, I bought their service, so I get advanced support, so they're supposed to come out. But I got the call yesterday and I was like, hey, if it's your fault, it's $75. And I said, I'll pay anything to get this thing fixed. Like, I can't, like, it's great. It's fine right now. But I was like, I can't live this way. I want what I paid for. And I want it to be consistent. So let's get this thing fixed. So I'm excited to have the guy come out today. Hopefully he can come in. Sometimes they're not even coming in the house anymore because of the COVID concerns. So
it's true. I didn't even think about that.
Oh, it's so much better, man. When I can hear you, like, this is why it's important. Like when everybody started doing remote stuff and the sound was so bad. I've listened to bad audio from you, by the way, not your fault, totally mine.
Right.
But for an hour and a half, normally I just would have quit, but I wasn't going to leave you in the lurch for an hour and a half. God, I'm stressed. I'm going to have to go smoke a cigar or something.
Well, I appreciate you hanging around, buddy. I really do.
It was good. Hopefully it was good quality content. I tried to piece together the things that we're saying. Yeah.
I appreciate you smiling and nodding your head going, mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I completely understand what you're saying.
So, all right. Well, thank you Thank you to the chat room. Good luck with your internet, buddy.
All right.
And,
Yeah. You too. You too.
we'll
We'll talk
see-
to you next week.
Yep.
See
See
you
you,
guys.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.